Hey everyone, welcome back to Botanic Haven. If you're new here, this is your go-to channel for everything related to gardening, plant care, and creating those beautiful green spaces both inside your home and out in your yard. Today we're diving into something that every gardener, whether you're just starting out or you've been doing this for years, needs to master: growing strong tomato seedlings from the very first day. I've learned these lessons the hard way over many seasons, and I'm excited to share exactly what works, so you can skip the frustrating failures and jump straight to success. Trust me, once you nail these fundamentals, you'll be amazed at how much easier everything becomes, and your tomatoes will thank you for it all season long. Let me start by saying that tomato seedlings are both forgiving and demanding at the same time. They'll survive a lot of mistakes, but if you want them to truly thrive and give you those big, juicy tomatoes later on, you need to get the early days right. I remember my first attempt at starting tomatoes from seed. I thought I could just stick them in some dirt, water them, and watch them grow. Well, they grew, but they were these sad, leggy things that flopped over and never really recovered. It wasn't until I started paying attention to the details, the exact steps that make the difference, that I began seeing those thick-stemmed, dark green seedlings that gardeners dream about. So let's walk through this together, step by step, and I'll tell you exactly what I do now and why it matters. The first thing you need to understand is that timing is everything. You can't just start your tomato seeds whenever you feel like it and expect great results. Tomatoes need time to grow strong before they go outside, but not so much time that they become root-bound and stressed in their containers. I usually count backwards from my last expected frost date, which varies depending on where you live, and start my seeds about 6 to 8 weeks before that date. For me, that usually means starting them indoors in late winter or early spring. If you start too early, you'll have these massive plants trying to survive in tiny pots, and if you start too late, your seedlings won't be strong enough to handle the transition outdoors. I learned this lesson from my neighbour Oliver, who's been gardening for decades. He showed me his calendar method where he marks the frost date and works backwards, and ever since I adopted that approach, my timing has been perfect. Don't rush it, and don't delay it. Get that calendar out and plan it properly from day one. Now, once you've figured out your timing, the next critical step is choosing the right soil mix. This is where so many people go wrong, and I was definitely one of them for a while. You might think any old potting soil will do, but tomato seeds are surprisingly picky about their growing medium in those crucial first weeks. What you want is a seed-starting mix, not regular potting soil. The difference is huge. Seed-starting mix is lighter, fluffier, and designed specifically for germination. It holds moisture without getting waterlogged, it allows those tiny roots to push through easily, and it's usually sterile, which means fewer disease problems right from the start. Regular potting soil is too dense and heavy for seeds. It can compact down and suffocate those delicate roots before they even get going. I buy a good quality seed starting mix from the garden centre, and honestly, it's worth every penny. You can make your own if you want to get fancy, mixing peat moss or cocoa coir with perlite and vermiculite. But for most home gardeners, a bag of commercial seed starting mix is the easiest and most reliable option. Fill your containers with this mix, moisten it thoroughly before you plant, and you're already way ahead of the game. Speaking of containers, let's talk about what to plant your seeds in. I've experimented with everything over the years, from egg cartons to fancy seed starting trays, and here's what I've found works best. You want something that's at least 2 to 3 inches deep, has drainage holes, and is clean. Those plastic cell trays you can buy at garden centres are perfect. They're reusable, they come in different sizes, and they fit nicely under grow lights or on windowsills. Some people love peat pots or biodegradable containers that you can plant directly into the garden, and those work fine, but I've found they can dry out quickly and sometimes restrict root growth if the roots don't break through the sides easily. I personally prefer plastic cells that I can reuse year after year. Whatever you choose, make sure it's clean. I wash mine with a mild bleach solution between uses to prevent any disease carryover from previous seasons. It might seem like overkill, but when you've lost a whole batch of seedlings to damping off disease like I did one year, you start taking cleanliness seriously. Trust me on this one. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments, and if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. But let's keep going because we're just getting to the really important stuff now. Once you have your containers filled with moist seed-starting mix, it's time to actually plant those seeds. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. Tomato seeds don't need to be buried deep. In fact, planting them too deep is one of the most common mistakes beginners make. I plant mine about a 1/4 inch deep, which is really just barely covering them with a thin layer of soil. Some people say a 1/2 inch, and that's fine too, but I've had the best germination rates with shallow planting. Make a small indentation with your finger, drop in 1 or 2 seeds, cover lightly, and press down gently to ensure good contact between the seed and the soil. That contact is important for moisture absorption. I usually plant 2 seeds per cell because not every seed will germinate. And if both come up, I can always thin them out later by snipping the weaker one with scissors rather than pulling it and disturbing the roots of the stronger seedling. After planting, the next thing your seeds need is warmth. This is absolutely critical, and it's something I didn't understand for years. Tomato seeds germinate best when the soil temperature is between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Room temperature is often not warm enough, especially if your seed trays are sitting on a cold windowsill or in a basement. I use a heat mat specifically designed for seed starting, and it made a world of difference. Before I got one, my germination was spotty and slow. After I started using the heat mat, my seeds popped up in 5 to 7 days like clockwork, all at the same time, which makes everything easier down the line. If you don't want to invest in a heat mat, you can get creative. Put your trays on top of the refrigerator where it's warmer or near a heating vent, just somewhere that stays consistently warm. Check the temperature with a thermometer if you're not sure. Once the seeds germinate and you see those first green shoots poking through, you can remove the heat mat or move them away from the heat source. They don't need that extra warmth anymore once they're up. Moisture is the next piece of the puzzle, and it's a delicate balance. Before germination, you want the soil to stay consistently moist, but not soaking wet. I cover my trays with a clear plastic dome or even just plastic wrap to create a mini greenhouse effect. This keeps the humidity high and prevents the soil from drying out. Once or twice a day, I check the moisture level by touching the soil surface. If it feels dry, I mist it lightly with a spray bottle. The key word here is lightly. Overwatering at this stage can cause the seeds to rot before they even sprout. I learned this from a gardener named Rose who told me about losing an entire batch of heirloom tomato seeds because she kept the soil too wet and they just rotted in the ground. She said it was heartbreaking because those seeds were expensive and hard to find. After the seedlings emerge, you can remove the plastic cover because they need air circulation now to prevent fungal diseases. At this point, I water from the bottom by placing the trays in a shallow pan of water and letting the soil wick it up through the drainage holes. This encourages the roots to grow downwards, searching for moisture, which creates a stronger root system. I try to keep the soil evenly moist, never letting it completely dry out, but also never leaving it soggy. It's a feel thing that you develop over time, but bottom watering really helps because it prevents you from accidentally overwatering. Now we come to what I consider the most critical factor in growing strong tomato seedlings, and that's light. This is where most people struggle, myself included for years. Tomato seedlings need intense direct light for at least 14 to 16 hours per day. A sunny windowsill might seem like enough, but in most cases, it's not. Even a south-facing window in winter or early spring doesn't provide the intensity or duration of light that tomatoes need. What happens without enough light? Your seedlings become leggy, meaning they stretch tall and thin, searching for light. They have weak stems, pale leaves, and they flop over easily. They're basically struggling to survive. The solution is artificial lighting, and you don't need anything fancy or expensive. I use basic LED shop lights that I bought at a hardware store. They're full spectrum, energy efficient, and they work perfectly. I hang them on adjustable chains so I can raise them as the seedlings grow. The key is to keep the lights close to the plants, about 2 to 3 inches above the tops of the seedlings. This might seem close, but LEDs don't put out much heat, so there's no risk of burning them. When the lights are close, the seedlings don't have to stretch to reach the light, so they grow short, stocky, and strong. I put my lights on a timer set for 16 hours on and 8 hours off. This gives the plants the light they need while also giving them a rest period, because plants actually need darkness too for proper growth and development. I remember talking to a young gardener named Lucas who was frustrated because his tomato seedlings were falling over and dying. When I asked him about his setup, he said he had them on a windowsill and turned them every day so they'd grow straight. I told him that turning them wasn't fixing the root problem, which was insufficient light. I encouraged him to invest in a simple light setup, even if it was just one shop light over a single tray, and within 2 weeks he sent me photos of the difference. His new seedlings under lights were thick-stemmed, deep green, and standing up perfectly straight. He said it was like growing completely different plants, and he couldn't believe he'd struggled for so long without realizing what the problem was. That's the power of proper lighting. It's not optional if you want strong seedlings. It's essential. Once your seedlings have their first true leaves, those are the ones that look like actual tomato leaves, not the initial rounded seed leaves. It's time to think about nutrients. The seed starting mix you used is pretty much sterile and doesn't contain much in the way of nutrients. The seed itself has enough stored energy to get the plant through germination and those first baby leaves. But after that, your seedlings need food. I start with a very diluted liquid fertilizer, usually something balanced like a 10-10-10 or even a half-strength fish emulsion. I fertilize once a week, and I'm careful not to overdo it. Too much fertilizer can burn those tender roots or cause excessive leaf growth at the expense of root development. Some people like to use compost tea or worm tea, and those are excellent organic options. The point is to give your seedlings a gentle boost of nutrients as they grow, not to blast them with heavy feeding. As they get bigger and stronger, you can gradually increase the fertilizer concentration, but in those early weeks, less is definitely more. Air circulation is something people often overlook, but it matters more than you might think. Stagnant air around your seedlings can lead to fungal problems like damping off, and it also results in weaker stems. In nature, plants deal with wind, which causes them to develop thicker, stronger stems to resist being blown over. Indoors, you need to simulate that. I run a small oscillating fan near my seedlings for a few hours each day, not blowing directly on them with full force, just creating gentle air movement around the area. This does two things. It strengthens the stems and it helps prevent disease by keeping the air moving. The first time I tried this, I was amazed at how much sturdier my seedlings became. Their stems were noticeably thicker and they didn't flop over when I eventually moved them outside. It's such a simple step, but the results are really impressive. As your seedlings grow and develop several sets of true leaves, you'll eventually need to transplant them into larger containers. This is called potting up. And it's important if you're going to keep them indoors for more than a few weeks. I usually transplant my tomatoes once they're about 3 to 4 inches tall, moving them from the small cell trays into 4-inch pots filled with regular potting soil now, not seed-starting mix. Tomatoes actually benefit from being planted deeper than they were growing before because they can form roots along their buried stems. This creates a more robust root system. I bury them up to their first set of true leaves, and within days you can see new roots forming along the buried stem. It's pretty remarkable. When I transplant, I'm gentle with the roots. I water them in well, and I keep them under the grow lights just like before. This gives them room to continue growing strong until it's time to go outside. Now let's talk about hardening off, because this step is absolutely crucial and skipping it is a recipe for disaster. I learned this the hard way my second year of gardening when I took my beautiful, healthy seedlings that I'd grown indoors for weeks and just stuck them straight into the garden on a sunny afternoon. Within hours, they were wilted, sunburned, and looked like they were dying. I thought I'd killed them. Luckily, most of them recovered, but it was a stressful experience and totally avoidable. Hardening off is the process of gradually acclimating your indoor seedlings to outdoor conditions over the course of a week or two. You start by putting them outside in a shaded, protected area for just an hour or two the first day, then bring them back inside. Each day, you increase the time they spend outside and gradually expose them to more sun and wind. By the end of the hardening off period, they can stay out all day and all night if the weather is warm enough. This gradual transition allows them to build up tolerance to UV light, wind, and temperature fluctuations. It's tedious, I won't lie, but it's absolutely necessary if you want your seedlings to survive and thrive after transplanting. Throughout this entire process, from seed to transplant-ready seedling, observation is your best tool. Check your plants every day. Look at the color of the leaves. Are they dark green and healthy or pale and yellowing? Feel the soil. Is it moist or dry? Look at the stems. Are they thick and sturdy or thin and weak? Watch for any signs of pests or disease, though these are less common with indoor seedlings. The more you observe and respond to what your plants are telling you, the better you'll become at growing them. I keep notes each year about what worked and what didn't, when I started my seeds, what varieties I grew, any problems I encountered. This has been incredibly valuable for improving my technique year after year. Gardening is as much about learning and adapting as it is about following rules. Another thing I've noticed over the years is that different tomato varieties can behave a bit differently as seedlings. Some germinate faster, some grow more vigorously, some are naturally stockier, while others tend to stretch more. If you're growing multiple varieties, which I always recommend because it's fun to try different flavors and types, you might notice these differences. Don't panic if one variety seems to be outpacing the others. As long as each plant looks healthy for what it is, you're doing fine. I grow everything from tiny cherry tomatoes to massive beefsteak varieties, and they definitely don't all look the same at the seedling stage. The cherries tend to be faster and more vigorous, while some of the heirlooms can be slower and more delicate. That's normal. Just give each plant what it needs and trust the process. I also want to mention that growing tomatoes from seed is incredibly rewarding, beyond just the practical aspect of getting plants for your garden. There's something special about watching that first tiny green shoot emerge from the soil, knowing that you started it from nothing more than a seed. It connects you to the whole cycle of life and growth in a way that buying transplants from a nursery never can. Plus, when you start from seed, you have access to hundreds of varieties that you'll never find as transplants. Heirloom varieties, unusual colors, specific flavor profiles, disease-resistant varieties bred for your region. The world opens up when you grow from seed. I have friends who are now completely obsessed with collecting and growing rare tomato varieties, all because they started learning to grow from seed and discovered how much diversity is out there. Let me share one more story that really illustrates why these exact steps matter. I have a friend named Daisy who decided she wanted to grow tomatoes a few years ago. She didn't ask for advice, just bought some seeds and gave it a try. She planted them in garden soil in styrofoam cups, put them on a windowsill, and waited. Some of them came up, but they were pale, spindly, and weak. She was watering them inconsistently, sometimes too much, sometimes letting them dry out completely. She didn't have nearly enough light. She didn't transplant them into bigger containers when they needed it. By the time it was warm enough to plant them outside, they were such sad little things that she almost gave up entirely. But she asked me for help, and I walked her through everything I'm sharing with you today. The next year, she followed these steps carefully, and the difference was night and day. Her seedlings were stocky, healthy, and vibrant. She actually couldn't believe they were the same type of plant. That season, she harvested buckets of tomatoes, and she's been hooked ever since. She told me that understanding these fundamentals changed everything for her, not just with tomatoes, but with her confidence in gardening overall. That's what I hope this guide does for you too. The beauty of these 7 exact steps, getting your timing right, using proper seed starting mix, choosing good containers, planting at the correct depth, providing warmth for germination, maintaining consistent moisture, and giving them intense light, is that they're not complicated or expensive. They just require attention to detail and consistency. You don't need a greenhouse or fancy equipment. A simple setup with basic supplies and a commitment to checking on your plants daily is all it takes. I've seen people grow incredible tomato seedlings in basements, spare bedrooms, even on kitchen counters under shop lights. Location doesn't matter as much as method. If you follow these steps from day one and stay consistent, you will grow strong, healthy seedlings that are ready to explode with growth once they hit the garden. They'll establish quickly, resist stress better, and ultimately produce more fruit than weak, leggy seedlings ever could. I think one of the most satisfying moments in the whole gardening season is that day when you transplant your seedlings into the garden and step back to look at them. If you've done everything right, they'll have thick stems, dark green leaves, and they'll look ready to take on the world. They'll barely wilt after transplanting, and within days, you'll see new growth. That's the sign of a strong seedling that got the right start. Compare that to the alternative, those floppy, pale things that struggle to survive and take weeks just to recover from transplanting. There's no comparison. The extra effort you put in during those first weeks pays off exponentially throughout the entire growing season. Strong seedlings become strong plants, and strong plants produce abundant harvests. It's really that simple. As we wrap this up, I want to encourage you to give this a try, even if you've never started seeds before or if you've had failures in the past. Every gardener has had seedlings die, including me. Many times. It's part of the learning process. But when you understand these fundamentals and apply them consistently, your success rate goes way up. Start small if you need to. Maybe just one tray of seeds, one variety you really want to grow. Use these 7 steps, pay attention, make adjustments as needed, and see what happens. I'm confident you'll be amazed at the results. And once you've mastered tomatoes, these same principles apply to so many other plants you might want to start from seed. Peppers, eggplants, herbs, flowers. The skills transfer beautifully. You're really learning how to be a better gardener overall, not just someone who grows tomatoes. One thing I should mention that really helped me over the years is keeping a simple journal or even just notes on your phone about your seed starting journey. Write down when you planted, what varieties you chose, what the germination rate was like, any problems you noticed, how the plants looked at different stages. This record becomes incredibly valuable over time because you can look back and see patterns. Maybe you'll notice that a certain variety always germinates slower, or that your seedlings do better when you start them a week earlier than you did last year. These insights accumulate and make you a better gardener season after season. I have notebooks going back years, and I still refer to them when I'm planning my seed starting each winter. It's fascinating to see how much I've learned and how my methods have evolved based on experience. Another aspect worth discussing is the psychological benefit of starting seeds indoors during the cold months. For those of us who live in climates with real winters, January through March can feel endless. The garden is dormant, covered in snow or frozen solid, and it seems like spring will never come. But when you're starting seeds indoors, you have this little oasis of green life growing under lights in your basement or spare room. You get to be actively gardening even when it's freezing outside. There's something deeply satisfying about that. It keeps your skills sharp, it gives you something productive to focus on, and it builds anticipation for the growing season ahead. Every time I check on my seedlings and see new growth, I feel that excitement building. It reminds me why I love gardening so much and keeps me motivated through the tail end of winter. I've also found that seed starting has become a wonderful way to connect with other gardeners. When you mention that you start your own tomatoes from seed, it opens up conversations. Other gardeners want to know your methods, share their own experiences, trade varieties, and compare notes. I've made some great friendships through these discussions. There's a whole community of people who are passionate about seed starting, and once you become part of it, you realize how much collective knowledge and enthusiasm exists. People share their surplus seeds, offer advice when you're troubleshooting problems, and celebrate your successes with genuine joy. It's one of the things I love most about gardening culture. Everyone wants everyone else to succeed because we're all working toward the same goal of growing amazing plants and harvesting beautiful food. Let me also address something that comes up frequently with beginners. What do you do if, despite your best efforts, something goes wrong? Maybe your germination rate is poor, or your seedlings develop problems, or they just don't look as healthy as you hoped. First, don't give up. Troubleshooting is part of the learning curve. Go through the 7 steps systematically and see where the weak point might be. Is the soil staying too wet or too dry? Are the lights close enough and on long enough? Is the temperature warm enough for germination? Is there adequate air circulation? 9 times out of 10, the problem can be traced back to one of these fundamental factors. Once you identify and correct it, you'll see improvement. And if you lose a batch of seedlings entirely, which happens to everyone at some point, you can often start over. Tomato seeds germinate quickly and seedlings grow fast. You might lose a couple weeks, but you can recover. The important thing is to learn from what went wrong so you don't repeat the same mistake next time. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today here on Botanic Haven. I hope this guide has given you the confidence and knowledge to grow the strongest tomato seedlings you've ever seen, right from day one. Remember, it's all about those fundamentals: timing, soil, containers, planting depth, Warmth, moisture, and especially light. Get those right, and everything else falls into place. If you have questions or want to share your own experiences and tips, please leave them in the comments below. I love hearing from you and learning what's working in your gardens. Until next time, happy gardening, and may all your seedlings grow strong and healthy.